Good morning, everyone. Thank you. A real pleasure to be here today to talk about our corporate keynote, which is all focused on HSBC. So I'm going to start by just giving you a little bit of introduction to what HSBC is, who we are, what we do. We're one of the world's leading international banks. We're just celebrating our 150th year, a couple of years ago. Originally, not a lot of people know this, but we're actually formed by two Scottish bankers from the UK who wanted to improve the financial services offered to people doing trade with Hong Kong and the Orient. So the logo actually comes from the Scottish flag, inverted a little bit. A lot of people think it's from China or from Hong Kong, but it's not. It's actually firmly rooted in the UK. So today we operate across 65 different markets and territories, and we serve 40 million customers worldwide. And we have around 238,000 employees. So we are a very big, complex organization, which is a good thing, because as a BA, it means there's lots of problems that we can solve, and we like to solve problems. So a little bit about me. I've been with the group for 15 years. I know what you're thinking, far too young to have been with an organization 15 years. You're absolutely right. I'm from the north of England, and I'm trying very hard to limit my accent so you can all understand me. I've primarily worked across IT and business transformation or change delivery teams, so roughly half and half, 7 years doing each. All of my roles have had a very strong alignment to business analysis. Business analysis has been kind of the bedrock of my career. It's what I've applied to everything I've ever done. Two key roles I've had in that time. One was head of HSBC change frameworks. So this essentially is how we deliver change in HSBC. A standard for how we do it, because when we get things wrong in how we deliver change, the impacts to customers are huge. We stop them being able to pay their bills, pay their friends, pay their mortgages. So we take change very seriously, and we have to make sure we get it right first time. The other key role was head of business analysis in the UK. So we had around 250 BAs across the UK. And my job was to make sure those BAs are skilled and trained with everything they need to do their job well. So I had lots of engagement with the IIBA over the years, and actually in my previous role, we actually integrated a lot of the Babok techniques into our internal change frameworks. And I'll talk a little bit about our frameworks as part of today. My current role is the absolute outlier, totally random. About a year ago, I decided I wanted to do something different, and I moved to our customer and strategy and insight team, and I'm head of social listening and analytics. And today I'm going to focus on this and give you a little bit of an insight into what we're doing with a new type of customer insight to improve overall customer experience and to improve how we offer services to customers, making sure they're more relevant and beneficial to those customer segments. I do have my LinkedIn address up there. If anyone would like to reach out and talk to me after, more than happy for you to get in touch. I love talking about this stuff. I'm very passionate about it. The more we can share this knowledge, the better across any industry. So please do get in touch and reach out. So today's corporate keynote, any excuse to use a Venn diagram. I've seen a few of them in a couple of other presentations, so I thought I'd follow suit. So the primary focus of today is to showcase what HSBC does. I want to show you what we're doing, and virtually everything I'm going to show you in today's presentation is something that we've put in place over the last 9 to 10 months. This is all brand new for us, and we're exploring and expanding all the time. I also want to make sure it's interesting, right? I don't want you to sit here just being bored about what HSBC is doing, so I'm hoping this stuff is really cool, it's really interesting. There's some really new, innovative technology that we're using to showcase some of this stuff, so I'm hoping you're going to find it really interesting. I also want it to be useful, so I want you to take away something from today's session and be able to apply it in your own organizations and your own areas. So I think there are some things in here which you can take and adapt to your market, your industry. And finally, I want to touch on the theme of the conference, creativity. I'm going to show you, hopefully, what you consider to be some really creative uses of this type of insight and what we're doing internally. So obviously, I'm aiming for the bullseye. I want to hit all 4 of these. I'm not afraid of failure, so if I do fail, at the very least, you're going to hear about what HSBC does. When it comes to being useful, I thought, okay, I'm going to put something to use in a positive context, which is the Mapmoji. Now, I would love to say that I've invented this for this conference, but I haven't. Much to my distaste, the Mapmoji is a real thing within our organization, which I hate. So about a year ago, we deployed a very popular collaborative chat tool called Slack. Other chat tools are available. And I've always been someone who's very keen to embrace new technology. So I put my team forward and said, we'd like to be the pilot for this project. We'd like to be the first users of Slack, which was great. Little did I know, you can upload your own emojis to Slack, and you can name them. And someone in my team did, and I still don't know who it was. And then it kind of took on a life of its own. So it's now used when they can't be bothered to say my name. Pure laziness. They use it when they're acknowledging that they've completed a task. My face just randomly appears on things. They use it anything to do with Agile. So the past 4 or 5 years, I've been heavily involved in Agile rollout across HSBC. I'm now helping turn our global marketing function to the first Agile function within the organization. So any mentioned buzzword phrase that's remotely connected to Agile, my face appears on it. Anything to do with service improvement, that's my BA history. Anything to do with making something better, improving it, again, there I am. This one has a form of punctuation, I have no idea. I appear at the start and end of sentences. The most worrying of all has got to be the last one, which is just to creep me out. So this makes me very nervous about ever being in a room with Sophie alone. So when you do see my face in this presentation, I thought let's at least put it to some good use. So I'm going to give you tips along the way, and there's my first one. If you're implementing Slack, disable the custom emojis, because now I can't delete this damn thing. So we're going to start with how do we deliver change within HSBC. So this is a bit of a throwback to my previous role. And we really deliver change against a consistent framework, which is our change loop. So this is broadly split into 2 sections. On the left-hand side, we have our design-led change, which is the bit in red, where we focus on understanding the business outcomes, understanding the customer journeys that are evolved around those outcomes. We then look at research, customer research and insight. What is the market telling us? What do customers really need? What are their intrinsic values that they're looking to embrace when they come to technology projects and banking? We then move into kind of current state analysis. So this is that strong BA skill set. This is where we start to do that real context analysis and understand the complexity of what happens today. And then we move into our solution design. And this is where we start to employ our design thinking techniques and approaches. And then as you move to the other side of the change loop, we're into the grey, dark grey, or the dark zone, it's called, the dark side of the change loop. This is where we actually deliver that change. So we've got a real project that we can actually then move through to delivery to make a difference in the organization. Now, I've spent most of my career on the dark side of the change loop, working in IT, working in change management, as I've mentioned. But the recent role is on research and insight. So that other area where we're entirely focused on the customer. Everything's about the customer. And there's a reason why I moved into this area. I've always been interested in understanding the underlying need of the customer, and the panel discussion that was on just before mentioned this as well. We never want to forget the customer in anything we do, and it's something that I've always been really keen to better understand what drives, motivates, and interests our customers, which is why I decided to take a jump into the unknown and move across to the strategy and research team. And one of the reasons I did that was because of this question. So you all know this scenario. You get into the office in the morning, you're in the lift with someone you haven't seen for a few months. You're probably not as happy as these guys if you've just got in the morning. And you ask someone, so what are you working on these days? And invariably, you get the same type of response. You get this internal focused language around what are the outputs that we're currently doing. What's the tangible things that I'm currently working on right now that consume me in my sort of day-to-day role. So I'm implementing a new mortgages system. I'm upgrading our existing CRM system. I'm evergreening our mobile infrastructure. It always tends to be focused on the now. Right now, what are you doing? What we're trying to get to, and what we want to get to, is the other side of the language. Customer and outcome focused all the time. So you're not just implementing a new mortgages system. You're making it easier for our customers to take out a mortgage when they're self-employed and don't have a regular, steady income. You're not just upgrading the CRM system. You're making it easier for our customers to contact us and let us know about their preferences and what they're interested in and how they want to be contacted. You're not just evergreening your mobile banking infrastructure. You're making it easier for customers to manage their financial well-being on the go and make investment decisions on the go. Make sure they're not over budget, etc. So we're really trying to make sure everything we do in HSBC is focused truly on the customer. And my first genuine tip is if you're ever asked this question or given an answer to this question that's internal or output focused, ask a follow-up question. How does that help our customers? 9 times out of 10, the person will be able to answer it, so they'll know about it, but you're just reminding them that's the important thing about what they're working on. And if they can't answer it, they'll want to know why. So they'll go off and at least figure out. So you're helping to constantly keep the customer at the forefront of your mind and your team's mind. No matter how customer-centric we say we are, and lots of organizations claim to be customer-centric, they're rarely as customer-centric as you want them to be. You always forget the customer when you're stuck in a project and you're doing the doing. So it was the answer to this question that actually made me really interested in customer insight. When I asked someone, so how does that help our customers? Their response was, I'm not sure, but it's what the insight told us, and we're going off the insight. So I thought I'd give you, first of all, a definition of what is customer insight. And this is a really nice one from the IMA. So customer insight is a deep and fresh perspective on the needs, wants, beliefs, and behaviors of current and future customers, often beyond what they can articulate themselves, which can be translated into compelling, commercially valuable solutions that connect customers to opportunities. It's a really nice definition, and the key word there is that often beyond what they can articulate themselves. So I think Steve Jobs famously said that if he'd have asked customers what they wanted from a phone, they'd have never created the iPhone. Sometimes you don't know what you want, but you know the underlying values and what drives you and what interests you. So insight can be really powerful in helping to make sure we connect customers to the right offerings that are going to help them and help us from a commercial point of view. So there's lots of methods of customer research, and I'm sure you're going to be very familiar with these. Customer surveys. How many times have you been given a survey over the past couple of months? How did you find our service today? What can we do to improve in the future? What would you like to see coming up next? And you're constantly battling between asking the customer about everything that you want to know and also trying to condense it to 3 questions so they don't get bored and never finish the survey. And then you've got focus groups. So can you get a customer segment together that interests you and share some early ideas and get some real feedback from those customers? And then you've got consumer panels. So can you pay a subset of your customers to answer all those detailed questions that you want to ask them and get that quick feedback from people who you know are your actual customers? Now, all of these have drawbacks. They're all time-consuming. In the age of Agile, when we want to get real feedback quickly, it can sometimes be very hard to use these techniques to get meaningful feedback. They're extremely costly, especially for an organization of our size. You know, we operate in 65 countries. That's a lot of different types of customers. So if we want to get a particular segment together to ask what they think about their banking propositions and what they'd like to see in the future, we need to employ external agencies who need to go to market and find these customers and bring them together. It's really costly. But the worst thing, and the biggest drawback, is the last one. It's unintentionally biased. Every one of these, we are asking the customer what they think about a subject. We are setting the agenda. We are asking them to give their opinion on a specific area of banking or their life, etc. So we're limiting what the customer can tell us. We're not just listening to what they want to talk about and what they're interested in. We're setting the conversation. So we're not going to talk about any of these today because I find these boring. We're going to talk about a new type of customer insight based on OSINT. Show of hands, anybody heard of OSINT? A couple of people, okay. What is it? Open source intelligence. Freely available public sources of information that you can analyze and draw some intelligence out of. Used across lots of different industries, government agencies, etc., to understand more about what's happening in the world. The most common kind of and readily available source is social media data. Vast amounts of data spanning back 6, 7, 8 years now, where it's just customers talking about things that interest them or things that frustrate them. Print and online media, newspapers, transcripts, blog sites, forums, etc. There is a vast and growing amount of open source data that you can tap into to find out more about your consumers. And the diagram on the right-hand side of the screen is from one of the tools that we actually use. And this is able to very quickly, based on a very simple search criteria, scour vast amounts of online news articles over a prescribed time period, and then understand the context of the conversation, automatically categorize it, link it together, so the different colors are different themes of conversation. All the tags on there are automatically assigned based on the nature of that. Also shows connections between those conversations. How's one conversation connected to another group of conversations? This is taking huge amounts of unstructured data and giving it a structure, giving it something that we could look into in more detail. I'm assuming you can probably guess what I searched for here. Good old Donald Trump. Love him or loathe him, the man generates a lot of social media data, and you're guaranteed to get a polarizing view on a lot of that content. So he's one of my favorites when I come to demo some of the capabilities we have. But this is really powerful, and we can apply this to anything: industry information, competitor information. We're not limited in what we can search for, and that's really the beauty of this stuff. And from this, we can then start to drill in, find out more detail, find emerging topics, emerging trends, emerging conversations that can help us understand more around what consumers are interested in. So how do we use this? How do we in HSBC put this vast amount of OSINT data to good use to help improve customer experience? Well, the first thing we look at is social media. It's why it's in my title, but it is still one of the primary sources of information for us, and one of the vast amounts of information we can get to on a very readily basis, really easily. 98% of consumers have used social media within the past month. That's huge. The graph at the bottom there shows the average time an individual spends on social media across different markets. And you can see it's growing. It's growing all the time over that 6-7 year period. Maybe not as fast as it used to be, but it's still growing. And on the right there, you've got the plethora of platforms that are out there, and they continue to add and change as well. So this is consumers talking about things that interest them, things that they hate, things that they like, and all of that can be better understood. And this could be used for bad, and I'm sure we've all seen the Cambridge Analytica scandal and how this data can be used to manipulate people. Thankfully, that's starting to be addressed with a lot of the privacy controls and improvements that are happening on these platforms. But we can also use it for good. And that's what we're trying to do in HSBC. We're trying to make sure that we use this to better understand our customers so we can develop better propositions that help them in their sort of day-to-day lives. And that's why my team exists. So we are the global social media team. We're based primarily in the UK, Hong Kong, and Shanghai, soon to grow into Canada as well. Around 23 people so far, probably growing to around 26, 27 by the end of next year. And this sort of infographic shows the types of things that we do. Now, the key two for me, and the key two we're going to talk about today, are the social listening activity and the research and insight. Increasingly, we're seeing more and more need on the governance one at the bottom there. So we have a team dedicated to taking down fraudulent accounts across all social media platforms, forums, and blogs. We see a lot of people impersonating our brand or impersonating our executives, and we have to take those down before they try and defraud our customers. So year to date, just under 1,000 fake accounts we've taken down. And we're seeing that grow about 20% every year. So it's a growing problem and something we're actively monitoring again. So really cool tools to help us do that. The research and insight is all about trying to find underlying behaviors and values of customers to help us inform our product proposition development, etc. And the social listening is a little more real time. That's kind of looking for what customers are talking about right now and how can we use that to help us improve the service. So I just want to talk a little bit more around what is social listening for those that don't know. The first step is you define what you're interested in listening about. What are you interested in hearing about that happens across these OSINT channels? So for us, we're interested to know when anybody talks about our brand. This is one of the things we're really interested in. If anybody mentions HSBC in any market, in any language, we'd like to know about it. We want to make sure we've heard that customer and we can understand what they're saying. So that's one of the things we search for. Any mention of that, almost instantly on some channels, is kind of tagged and brought in for analysis. What we're then able to do is assign themes and keywords to categorize and slice that information. So yes, they mentioned HSBC, but have they mentioned it in the context of mortgages, in the context of current accounts, lending, borrowing, problems with customer service, problems with a contact center? So we can theme and group that conversation and chunk it up into buckets. And then we can push it into our AI and analytical engine, which will automatically start to understand the nature of the conversation and group it into subtopics. And we can then use that to help pass it to relevant teams when there's relevant information for them to actually act upon it. So this is an example of some of the stuff that we can kind of bring out. At the bottom there, you've got a graph of mentions over time. Bottom right, you've got kind of where that customer came from, so where that tweet or that piece of content originated, which country, which city. Top right, we can automatically categorize that conversation. So it's there saying what are the top online banking issues that customers having, and we can say, oh, it's about the logon, it's about making payments, it's about problems with their security key. And we use this primarily to help us with service availability. We want to make sure our services are available to customers at all times because they use that to pay their bills, to pay their friends, etc. So we have real-time instant alerts when specific keywords are met. So if you say, hey, HSBC, is your mobile app down? Or is your banking app down? Is your iOS app down? Is your Google Play app down? As soon as those keywords are mentioned, it's flagged up instantly. And we can provide that to our operational teams to say, hey, there might be a problem with some of our services. And you'll be surprised at how often the customer is the first person to recognize there's a problem with some of our services. Despite all the clever technology we have to tell us when things are up and down, sometimes it's still the customer that's first to know. We can also use AI, and this is really where, of the past sort of 6 months, this stuff has really come into its own now, and it's really starting to provide us with meaningful benefits. We can use AI to monitor a given subject matter. So monitor any conversation around HSBC and mentions of our mobile app. And what this does is then start to spot anomalies in that conversation. So as soon as there's an unusual spike in activity, it'll tell us. As soon as there's a new topic that's being discussed and has gained some traction, it'll tell us. So in effect, this is helping to spot things that we're not looking for, but customers are talking about. And it can tell us almost real time, we need to be aware of this, go in and have a look at it. And then we can obviously automatically segregate all that into different topics, different segments, which allows us to distribute it internally to the correct teams within our organization, of which there are many with an organization of our size. So in practice, what do? Well, we give our IT teams these types of interactive dashboards, real-time dashboards in our command center monitoring different services for our customers to tell us when there's a problem. And they can quickly use this real time to say, oh, we need to look into that. Let's go see if there's a real issue there, whether it's just a particular customer having a problem. This is just one of many types of screens we offer. Don't be put off by this graph. Our services are not that bad. That doesn't mean our services are down all the time. This is just one example I wanted to share with you. So that's around service availability, and that's okay. It's kind of interesting. It's necessary. It's important to our customers, so of course we want to support it. But this is where we wanted to get creative. This is where we started to see the potential in this technology to do more for us and to help us better understand our customers. So a number of people from the organization had seen these live displays within our IT operations teams and said, well, if you can tell me about customers that are having problems with our online banking and mobile apps, can we find out about when they're having problems with anything else? So can we answer the question, where is it hard for customers to do business with HSBC? And yes, we can. So we work with them quite heavily to create what we call our customer pain point reports. So these are unbiased customer perspectives on doing business with HSBC. They're basically telling us everywhere where they find it hard to do business with us. And that could be from, I don't think your branch staff in this location have the right skills or training to know their products. I don't understand your call center staff, right down to, I find it too confusing to understand which investment to make and your advisors haven't helped me. Anything that frustrates them, we can understand it. And what we did is we created reports across all of our markets for every proposition, and we made them openly available to everybody. And I think this is one of the key kind of lessons and takeaways from encouraging creativity. You have to make it easy for people to get to the information. So we built this internal portal. Very simply, it looks complicated. This is using a very open source free software called Mobilize, hosted on a SharePoint site. Makes it look pretty, and making things pretty is half the barrier to people using stuff. They can click on a market. Within there, they'll get a list of every single country within that market that we operate. They can then click on a proposition, and they'll get a report that looks a little bit like this. An example from our mortgages report. So this is over a 30-day period for the UK. Number of complaints or pain points that customers experienced. At the top left there, you've got subtopics of conversation. So yes, we know customers are talking about mortgages, but we could be more specific and say, they're talking about problems with payments of mortgages. They're talking about problems with the application process. They're talking about problems with how they get a remortgage application through. So we're able to help benchmark and segregate how many complaints or problems customers experience in the different elements of our service. We're also able to look at emotion and sentiment. So what's the general emotion and sentiment at the top right there? Black, neutral, red, bad, green, good. Now I should call out at this point, one of the problems with OSINT data is you're going to get polarized views. You're either going to get the scenario where the customer's so pissed off that they felt they have to vent on social media, or they're absolutely delighted, an unexpected moment of delight with their service that they want to share it and talk about it with their friends. So you are going to get that polarized view, but that's okay because that's still useful. You're not going to get, I had an all right application opening a mortgage with HSBC. It just doesn't exist. So you are going to get a polarized view. The benefit of this for us is that we can benchmark. We can say over the past 2 to 3 months, this is how many customers have talked to us about problems with our mortgage process. And if we benchmark, we can then start to monitor and measure for improvement as we implement changes to improve that service. What we can also do is identify the common and consistent pain points, and we can start to address them through our change programs. So this is where it feeds into that left side of the change loop and says, this is where customers are having problems. So we give these to our product owners. They can see for their product that they own, these are the common problems we're having in each market. And a lot of the time, those problems are consistent across markets. So we can start to improve the service based on this feedback. One of the most surprising for me is we can look for quick tactical changes. And I wasn't expecting this, but we did find very simple fixes to a lot of customer frustrations. A lot of it's down to communication. Some financial products are complex, and the way we describe them to customers confuses them, and they don't understand the process they have to go through. So a lot of these pain points we were able to fix just by better communication with our customers, giving them the right information at the right point in time. So a lot of this stuff is easily resolved as well. So that's my next real tip. If you're not using OSINT data within your organization, you should be. And you don't have to be a big bank to get some of this stuff. It's not all expensive tools and technology that you need to buy in to actually use it. There's a really good website, osintframework.com, and there's quite a few of them out there which categorize and list freely available sources of information, different types of OSINT data. Not all of it's going to be useful, but some of it might be. Some of it will be interesting. If you're a small organization that doesn't generate a lot of the traffic specifically about your company, you can at least find out about competitors, or the marketplace, or the general products that people are interested in. So there's loads of really useful sources of information that you can start to explore. Google Trends is one of my favorites. It's been used a lot in marketing for a long time, but you can very quickly find out what customers are searching for around a term that interests you. So I can put in HSBC for 2017 and 2018, and I can see all the terms and differences in terms of what customers searched for on Google. Really, really powerful to understand what your customers are interested in when they're talking about your company or your product and services. So once we did the pain points reports, it went down really well. The business loved it. The business was like, this is great, this is really useful. We're getting it into the hands of people that need to know about it. But we did find out that only those people that really owned the customer experience of the product and the proposition were using it regularly. So the product owners, yeah, sure, great. They were using it. They were understanding the customer. They were feeding it into their backlogs for improvement. But we didn't find the people in the team. So the BAs working on a project, they weren't necessarily going in and understanding the problems that customers were having. And this was a shame for us. And we understood why. They're busy doing their work. They don't have time to go off and look into these reports. They've got stuff to do. They've got deadlines to meet. But we really wanted to make sure we're keeping the customer in the room with people on day-to-day projects. So we paired up with our digital teams, started with mobile banking initially, and we're expanding this across a number of other products we make internally. And we said, let's build you a really visual interactive display, similar to what we did for our IT operations teams, that brings the customer into the room, into the everyday room. So we did. So we put together this sort of visual display which runs in our digital hubs where all our mobile banking app team developers get together. It's constantly running real time, showing mentions over the last 30 days. It refreshes, and it segregates that customer conversation again. On the left-hand side, any mention the customer says about HSBC in the mobile app. In the middle, using the ability to segregate conversation, we can look for the wish list. So anytime a customer says, hey, when are you adding this feature to your mobile app? Or are you going to put in place this new thing? That language the customer uses to say what they'd like to see in our app, we're able to segregate and identify and give a sort of wish list to our mobile banking teams. And on the right, the pain points. Again, where are customers specifically having frustration or pain points with your application? So this is just a passive way of bringing the customer into the room. Really powerful just for teams to constantly be reminded about what the customers are thinking, what's important from the customer perspective. We didn't stop there though. We said, right, it's great knowing about us, but OSINT data is freely available across the entire marketplace. So let's give them a view of what customers think about our competitors in each market. Let's see what they're saying about our bigger, more established ones in the UK, Barclays, Santander. But let's also bring in the fintechs, the disruptors that are changing our industry. Again, just keeping our teams focused on the customer and what they think about the products and services. Then we went a little further and said, well, there's other sources of information that are useful for that team. So let's integrate all of the Google Play reviews and the iOS Store app reviews. And let's give them a real-time view of the average daily score of their various apps. Anything to keep them forefront of their mind, what the customer's thinking, what they're interested in, what they're having trouble with. So this was great, and this went down well. We're starting to deploy this across different teams, across different applications, constantly thinking about how we can bring the customer into the room. So then we said, well, this is really valuable, so let's integrate this free source of voice of customer feedback into our voice of the customer stack. So we have lots of other sources of customer feedback. We've got call center. So all of your call center calls you have with HSBC, automatically transcribed into text, pushed through the very similar AI engine to categorize and understand the context of those conversations so we can look for ideas and ways to improve service. We've got all of our complaints data where someone's taken the time to ring up or go to branch and raise a complaint. They're giving feedback in branches, even employee feedback, where our employees are telling us what they think the problems are that customers have. And when we started to do this, I got a bit of pushback saying, well, yeah, your social media data is great, but it's not as valuable as the other source of data. They didn't seem to recognize the legitimacy of it because it's kind of not directly directed at us. It's just customers talking, which I thought was nonsense because it doesn't matter what channel you're complaining out, a complaint's a complaint. A frustration is a frustration. So we did a little bit of analysis and we took one market, Canada, and we said, well, let's look at each source of this data and see what customers find difficult about internet banking in Canada. And surprise, surprise, what do we find? It's consistent. The pain points and the trouble the customer experiences are the same regardless of the source of that complaint and frustration. So what does that mean? Well, it means OSINT data is a reliable indicator of what your customers think about your services and your products. So it's got legitimacy. It's a valid source of kind of customer feedback. And the relevance there is that because it's so readily available, so instant, and you can analyze it so quickly, it's a much, much quicker and more usable source of customer feedback in real-time environments, especially when you get into agile development. You want to know what your customers think about a new iteration or a new release of software. So in my background, I started to think about, well, how do we apply this to the change loop? How do we make sure that we're not just collecting that information on the left-hand side, where we've always been very consumer-focused, customer-focused. So yes, we feed in the pain points and those insights around customer behaviors and value. But we also want to see what we can do at the other side of the change loop, where all our change teams and our BAs operate. So we started to look at how we integrate that, so we can use it as an incremental source of feedback. When we do an agile initiative and we deploy an iteration, they can get in touch with us in advance and say, hey, we're putting a new feature live on mobile banking. Can you set up some listening so we know straight away what customers think about it and any complaints they have? And we can do that real time and inform that team real time what customers are talking about when it comes to their specific release. The ability to benchmark means we can start to use it as success measures. Let's say we want to say, I don't know, a success for this project would be if we've reduced the customer complaints around the mortgage application. We can benchmark that. We can compare that over different time periods. We can look 6 months before you implemented that change, 3 months after. Has there been a noticeable change in the customer feedback? And we can look at genuine sentiment uplift. The emotion that customers put behind what they're talking about. Have we improved that customer sentiment? So there's really practical ways that you can apply this to the actual change lifecycle as well. Now, I knew for this to work, we had to still get over that barrier of how do we make it easy for our BAs and our change teams to actually access the data. Again, if you put up a barrier and make it hard for them, they're just not going to bother. They're too busy doing work. So we put in place a very simple internal portal. As I mentioned, built on Mobilize. It's a great free app that lets you build really nice open source mobile websites, hosted on a SharePoint site, makes it engaging, makes it interesting. makes it really easy for them to get in touch with us and request data. So Jira Service Desk on the other side there. Anyone in any project can raise a very quick request to our team and say, I'm interested in social data around this type of thing, and within an hour to 3 hours, we can build that and we can be looking for it, and we can automatically email them reports on a daily, weekly, monthly basis telling them what customers are talking about. It's zero effort for them, and it gives them a real project win. They can take back that feedback to their sponsor and say, hey, we implemented this, and this is what the customer thinks about it. And I think it was mentioned in another talk, if you give a senior sponsor direct customer verbatim, that counts more than anything. It's the most valuable source of feedback. So before I kind of move to questions, I just want to give you a little bit of a what's on the horizon, what's happening next. And this next tool is really cool, really interested me, around AI linguistics. So this great understanding the topics and themes of conversations, but can we understand more around how people are talking, how they're describing the services, how they feel about them. The origins of this application were really interesting. So this was actually Lancaster University in the UK, which is a renowned linguistic university in the UK, pairing up with a national crime agency. And they came with a problem saying, we want to be able to identify online predators. People chatting to teenagers, pretending to be teenagers. How do we do that? How do we better identify people who aren't who they say they are? And linguistics could be the answer. So the way it works is you upload 2 data sets. The first data set in the real example was the control source, so verified sources of teenage chat. So cool school forums, school chat sites where we knew the teenagers chatting on there were genuine teenagers or children. That became our control. They then fed in general online chatter. So general chats between people on online forums, websites, chat sites. And this tool goes through its AI engine and it analyzes, okay, the topics, the word, the phrases, and the grammar. So it's not about what they're saying, it's about how they're saying it, how they structure sentences, how they communicate with each other. And from doing this, they're able to identify outliers, things that are different between the 2 data sets. Over the past 2 years, it's put around 8 people in jail so far in the UK, through very simple things like somebody impersonating a child uses the word presumably. That's a word that most teenagers don't use in general conversation. It's one word, but it was identified as an outlier, allows the crime agency to focus in on who said that word, look at them in a bit more detail and figure out if they are who they say they are. This company is now using their technology to make it more commercially viable, looking at industries. So we're looking at them and say, this would be really helpful for us in saying, let's see how customers are talking differently about different things in the banking industry, what's interesting them, how they're talking about it, how do they feel about the bank. So we're going to use this to look at how customers talk about our services now from compared to them. We can use this across competitors as well. How do customers refer to HSBC versus Citibank? How do they talk to us differently? What do they feel about our organization? Where's the angle that we can use to help them be more interested in us? We can understand more about what customers are interested in, as I mentioned, and we can identify topics and trends and discussions over time. So again, just helping us understand more around what our customers are talking about and what interests them. And that helps us build better propositions, products, and provide a better level of service. So just to recap, OSINT data is vast and growing. It's unbiased, crucially. It's got real value. It's valuable information for you to understand your customers. It is freely available. You can get to that information if you want it. It's there for you. You don't have to employ expensive tools. You can find free sources and start to use it and see where you can find real good use cases to put this to use. The advances in AI and machine learning over the past half year alone have meant the analysis effort that you need to expel to get meaning out of this is vastly reduced. You can get real interesting insights from this data really easily. So use it to help fix your customer pain points. Use it to help your change management and embedding of new changes. And use it to try and bring the customer into the room in everything that you do. Thank you very much. Happy to take any questions. Don't know if we have any runners around with microphones. Anyone want to shout out questions? Yes. What's the adoption be like? Yeah. The interesting thing is Everybody wants to know what the customer's talking about. So from my point of view, the adoption's been fantastic. As soon as you say to someone, I'm going to give you meaningful information about what you're doing and what the customer thinks about it, they want it. They can't get enough of it. The biggest problem we have is the resource required to actually help and support them. So yeah, adoption's not been a problem, which is a nice change. Sure.
Thank you. If you use any internal data, do you have any customer disclosures that you offer them when they have account agreements or anything like that?
So my team only focused on OSINT, external data. Internal data is used in other parts of the team. We are looking at how we join that up. So yeah, absolutely, with privacy notices, we have to let customers know how we intend to use their data. But yeah, for us, it's all about external, open, public data. Oh, question over there.
Yeah. Is there also the risk of bias in the data that you're collecting, and how do you deal with that?
Bias in the actual data we collect. There absolutely is. It's one of the challenges we have right now, which is the data we pull in is based on our search criteria. We've said we want to search for. So there's a risk that there's bias in the things we're looking for. The way around this for us is we're actually employing specialists to check over our algorithms and our search terms to make sure we don't introduce bias in what we're looking for. This is a new area for us. We have a new board-level BI, big data, and AI ethics board, which looks at how we do this stuff on a regular basis. It's a new problem for us, but our way around it is we're basically employing specialists to help make sure we don't introduce bias in our analysis and in the conclusions that we kind of draw from insight gathering. There's a question down here at the front.
So, which tool do you pull the OSINT data into?
We use quite a few.
For analysis and reporting?
We use quite a few. I don't mind mentioning them. We use Sprinkler, Crimson, Pulsar. There's lots of tools out there on the marketplace. What you will find is there's lots of similarities across those tools. It's very competitive at the minute. Everybody's putting this AI and machine learning to use, and they're all vying for kind of market share. So if you are going out and you're interested in these tools, don't be afraid to play hardball when you're negotiating the price for these things. The way I've done this in the past is gone out and say, I've got this very small budget, what can you give me for it? And because they're so desperate for market share, they'll give you a good price. So don't be afraid to play hardball with these companies, and there's lots out there. There are about 5, 6, 7 quite big outfits that do a lot of this data analysis.
Thank you, Matthew. You briefly touched on their poll buyers on the information you guys collected, either too happy about the service or unhappy, and you said a benchmark it. Could you talk about a little bit more about that? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned kind of you get the polarizing view. Yeah. So, I mean, for us, we acknowledge that we're going to get a polarizing opinion. So when we talk about sentiment, we assume that there's a broad number of people that are in the middle somewhere. They're neither bothered or overly happy with what we're offering. So when we come to benchmarking, we primarily benchmark the negative. We primarily look to say, this is where customers are experiencing pain or frustration. We look at those volumes and the frequency we see those types of activities. And that's what we then look to improve. We'll also look at the extremes. So when I talked about those moments of unexpected delight, for example, when you buy a mortgage in the UK with one of our sub-brands, they send you a welcome basket when you first move in and you draw down your loan, and you get a bit of cup of tea and some biscuits to help you move in day. That generates a lot of customer positive sentiment on social. So we'll look at opportunities of where can we introduce those moments of delight into future kind of products and services. But from the benchmarking side, we primarily benchmark the negative pain points and try and reduce those when we implement new changes.
Good morning. So do you use OSINT to research on what people are talking about your competitors?
Yes, absolutely. There's a couple of use cases. One is the brand. One is any mention of HSBC, which is obviously important to us. The other is competitors. So where we have competitor propositions that are fighting for market share in a given area, will help our teams understand more around what customers think of our competitors. That's one of the real valuable sources of information here. It's very easy to understand what customers think about others in the marketplace. And the third thing is general market. So what do people generally think about retirement products, pensions? So we can use this data to help us with our more proposition development, and insight activity. So we will set up kind of online searches to say, tell me what people are talking about when they're talking about savings in general in the marketplace. So not just looking at brands, but looking at generally, what do people want to save for in the future? Why are people interested in saving money? So we can do very broad scale research as well. It doesn't have to be limited to an organization or a competitor.
Good morning. My question is, do you use influencers to help shape the conversation that's going on online?
No. To be blunt, in some markets they do use influencers from a promotion point of view, from a improved kind of brand awareness. Most of our markets we don't, simply because, to be honest, customers aren't that interested in banking. There's not an ideal influencer online where you'd say, go and talk about HSBC, where it doesn't look very false and very forced. So influencers isn't a big part of our strategy when it comes to kind of social media strategy.
Good morning.
Morning.
You had mentioned the new ethics board and just understanding how heavily regulated the banking industry is. Have you been met with any resistance along the way as you've introduced this concept, and how have you handled that?
Not specifically with this concept, because this is just helping us understand what people are saying via freely available sources of information. I think the ethics board is interested in how we're using AI internally when it comes to things, more complex things like credit scoring, or, it's those applications where we have to be very, very careful that we're not being biased in the way we're making these decisions. So the ethics board's there to help review our approach to different things that involve big data or AI, and make sure we're doing it with the customer in mind, so make sure we're not introducing bias in how we kind of use those technologies when we're offering products and services to customers.
So you talked about the change loop and beginning to use the data to influence the next cycle. Do you have any examples where you're the second or third loop of the change loop, and how does the data change?
Yeah, so we don't have that example yet, purely because this stuff came out within the last 6 months. So we're starting to put it to use right now. We're using it in our mobile banking teams and our mortgages teams, so they're starting to get reports on what customers are talking about, and we're assessing over the next couple of months to see if recent changes have made an impact. So we expect by the end of next year we'll start to get an idea on the validity of that when it comes to using it as a sort of success measure or change embedding activity to support us. So not yet, but hopefully we'll see that in the next kind of couple of months. One thing I didn't mention on the change loop is that is agnostic of methodology and underlying approach. So we use that change loop for our big programs of change. We use it for continuous change with Agile. We use it for our scaled Agile framework implementations as well. It's a principle-based approach to change, and that can be applied to any underlying methodology. So we're trying to see where this type of OSINT data sits within different underlying methodologies as well. Question in the front?
So you're talking about a big company with millions of customers and hundreds of thousands of employees.
Yeah.
What's your thought on smaller companies, which
Yeah.
probably have much smaller print on social media?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So you're not going to find the plethora of mentions of a smaller company. You're not going to see that volume of traffic around smaller brands. But that doesn't reduce the value of this from a market perspective. So you might not be able to find out a lot about smaller brand complaints and pain points. But you can look to what customers think within your broader market. You can look at competitors and get a view on where they're experiencing frustration with your competitors and whether you can apply that to your smaller brand company. So there's still value in it. It's just a slightly different axis you want to be looking at, because you can't kind of rely on your own brand mentions. Question over here? Making Jared work for it today.
So you had mentioned how business analysis was a theme throughout your career, and you had many different roles. Can you just talk about how you decided what was next for you?
Yeah. So I love complexity, and I love solving problems, and that's why I've stayed at HSBC as long as I have. So in every role I've ever had, I've always been interested in understanding a part of the business that I haven't yet worked in. So I started off in testing, I did that for a year, and then I was like, oh, I want to be a developer. I want to go in analysis. I want to be product owner. I want to be a project manager. So throughout my career, I've moved around within the relative comfort of change management and IT, so an area I know well. This role was the outlier. So I did not get this role because I knew anything about customer insight, which sounds bad. I got this role because I was here to help us put the new technology to use. How can we improve the way we're using this? So when I applied, I was asked to apply and said, we've got some new technology, but we don't know how to put it to use. Because these people were so focused on the customer, they're not focused on how you can use that to change the organization. So this was a kind of, for me, it was a jump into the unknown because, quite frankly, 15 years doing change, I feel like I knew it quite well. The challenge starts to change a little bit, so I wanted to move into a totally different environment, totally new challenge, and see if I could put my skills to good use. And one of the things I found, which is most interesting for me, is that BA skill set is as relevant in any context as it is in change. You can take it outside of, I see it in marketing function now. They've never heard of business analysts. They don't know what it is. And that's great for me because I can come in and tell them all the things they should be doing. And they're like, wow, never even heard of that before. So there's real opportunity, I think, for BAs to do more horizontal movement within an organization. Personally, I would encourage it, and I do with my current team, and say, just get out and do something different. If you don't like working in an unknown environment, maybe not for you, but if you like that sort of thing, do it because you just learn more and more about more and more of the organization, more and more of the industry, and you can be more and more effective and add more value in your role. So I do it because I love being scared at work and not knowing what I'm doing and figuring it out. One more question?
What's your strategy on handling negative comments?
Okay. So it's a really interesting one because there's two schools of thought on this, and some areas of the bank have different schools of thought. Some different countries and different markets approach this differently. But for me, when there's a negative comment, our strategy is first, can we close the feedback loop? Can we go back to that customer and really understand what's wrong, and can we resolve their problem? So we're currently introducing a new Net Promoter system. You've all heard of the Net Promoter score, I'm sure, but this is about whenever anyone mentions something bad that's frustrating them, what can we do for that specific customer to better resolve their problem? So if there's a negative mention, we'll try and resolve it in an online discussion. So we'll ask them to direct message us, and can we fix their problem? We'll never remove negative comments. We'll never hide negative comments because that's a genuine customer perception, and that they have the right to say it. So lots of organizations and lots of brands will actually hide negative comments because they think it's damaging their brand. We absolutely see it as an opportunity to improve. So yeah, so our strategy is basically, can we resolve that first point of negative comment from the customer? Can we learn from it? Can we do something different with it? Never to hide it or ignore it. Question at the front here? Oh, there's one back.
So what was the biggest aha moment for you guys, especially using OSINT versus your prior customer insights, which were more derived by you guys versus these are being more of the genuine ones? So what was the biggest aha moment?
I think the volume of information was the aha moment for us. So this has been around for a long time, but only in the past, I'd say, 8 months has the technology, the AI, the machine learning, been able to do that really quick analysis. So we still do those other types of customer research. They're still important to us. But this is just so much more readily available and so instant. So the aha moment, I think, for us was when we actually got a new tool that had a new AI engine. We put some of this information through. And like with the Donald Trump example, that was taking thousands and thousands of articles and condensing it to something visual and something you could understand and then interrogate. So we could see the potential straight away in terms of the use cases for this and how we could get that data into the hands of people internally that can do something with it. That's the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is getting it into the hands of someone in your organization that can actually act upon it. And I think, as I mentioned, the challenge with creativity in general is being transparent, being open, making sure everybody has access to everything to help trigger that, oh, what about this? Can we do that? And all the examples I've shown there is where we've focused on one thing, and as a result of doing that, someone else has seen it and said, oh, well, can we take that principle and apply it over here? So we're really keen on promoting, and in an organization our scale, internal promotion is a big thing. You have to go out there and you have to put it in front of people. The nice thing is, because it's so quick, we can tailor this stuff to a specific team, a specific market, a specific product, we can tailor that within minutes. It doesn't take a long time to say, here's a tailored version of this for you. It means something to them. It's about what they're doing in their day-to-day jobs, so they're interested in it, and they just lap it up. Absolutely love it.
Hi. Is there an expectation of service recovery for individual natures of complaints? And how are your regulators responding to the ability to have transparency to huge volumes of potentially, what customers perceive as unfair, deceptive, whatever practices?
So because we are a regulated industry, and this has been an interesting challenge for us, regulators want to know about any legitimate source of customer complaint, customer frustration. We've done that historically via our contact centers, so when you direct a message at HSBC and you make a complaint, it gets tagged, we try and ring you up, we try and resolve it, we report that back to the FCA and say this is the volume of complaints we're having. But that doesn't always happen, especially with the volume of OSINT data across so many blogs and forums. It's hard for us to understand exactly how far the regulator wants us to go, which is a common problem in the banking industry. The nice thing that we've seen in the past 2 months is that we have a feature in one of our tools called Intuition. Again, it's AI-based learning, machine learning. It learns when a customer is venting a complaint on any source of information. It automatically tags it as a complaint. So we can now automate all of our complaint reporting and say, this is the volume of complaints we've had across all OSINT channels. These are the channels we're able to engage on. Because some of those channels we can't legitimately go and involve ourselves in the customer conversation, especially if they're not talking directly to us. If they're talking directly to us on social, it's flagged, we respond to it, and it gets logged. But I think it's the tools are giving us better capability to improve our reporting to our regulators as well at the minute.
Yes. Can OSINT be applied for organizations providing services to the government sectors?
Say that again, sorry.
Organizations working for the OSINT, working for the government, like my organization, we are providing services to the government entities.
Yeah.
Okay, so can this be applied principle there?
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason why not. Again, you are finding out information that customers are talking about any subject. So I don't see an industry where this can't be applied, as long as you can get access to some type of information that's relevant for your industry or your area. 100%. I think a lot of the OSINT tools that I showed as well are used by the government to understand what the population's talking about, what the population's interesting. These tools are heavily used by governments and organizations themselves to understand general public opinion. There's a question on the front here.
Hi. So since you've started using this, is this something that you market or you talk to the customer about that, hey, you're talking and we're listening and this is what we're doing?
Yeah. So this is the Net Promoter System that we're doing. So this idea of closed feedback loops, we're trying to get much better at acknowledging when a customer said something and doing something positive with it. So I don't have a specific example, but all of this information is fed into what can we do about it, what's the so what moment. I think one of the really interesting use cases is from a marketing context. So right now we're doing a big campaign on sustainability, financial sustainability. It's a hot topic, but we don't know what people are interested in around sustainability. It's hard, it's not something that everybody talks about in a banking context. So we're using that last tool that I showed around linguistic analysis to say, what are customers talking about when it comes to sustainability? What areas of sustainability are they really interested in? What resonates really well with people? And we're using that to design our narrative for our campaign. So essentially, what customers are talking about and what they're interested in is going to determine what we invest in from a sustainability point of view and how we promote what we're doing in a sustainability. So this is, customers are basically directly saying, you should put your investment for sustainability in these things, and that's what we're doing. So a really direct relationship between what the customers are interested in and what we're doing on that subject matter. That's something we're doing right now.
One question about team size, team makeup, learning curve. If you just speak briefly to that.
Yeah. So it's an interesting team for me. The team are primarily, we started off in First Direct. I don't know if you know First Direct in the UK. It's a digital brand, sub-brand of HSBC. They're a team of 12 people that do the analysis and research for this. they all started from very diverse backgrounds, but all customer-focused roles. So they were all customer service roles or responding to social media kind of complaints. So they had a good understanding of the customer, but they had none of the technical skills and technical understanding that I'm used to working in change and IT. So this was a bit of a, I came in with lots of new tools and say, you should do this, and they're like, whoa, don't understand what you're on about. The good thing, I think, and the thing that's made it possible is the tools that we use aren't that complicated. A lot of the new AI and machine learning capabilities, they've abstracted that complexity. So they've made it very simple. You literally just say, I'm interested in this type of subject. And it throws you back some results and you say, oh, exclude any mention of that, exclude any mention of this. So the tools themselves are quite user-friendly, some more than others. And that's allowed us to kind of use our existing skills base in the team to actually do a lot of this stuff. There are going to be limitations. We're actually now pairing up with a lot of our big data analytics teams in our digital world, and we're giving them access to this. We're linking the APIs from these tools. So these tools do have open APIs. You can integrate it with other internal sources of information and start to do comparisons across bigger data sets. So we're starting to get the techies involved and the data scientists as well.
So, pardon me, HSBC obviously works direct with end consumers, so it has a fairly large social media footprint, so I would expect. For B2B organizations where that may not exist, curious what value you see out of the different channels, social media versus others.
I think that's, again, the nice thing about OSINT, because social media is one source, and it's a source of large volume, but it's not the only source. So we do use it in some B2B contexts, but it's far less volume. So there are online forums and blogs that small businesses talk on. These tools can have web crawlers to analyze any site you're interested in. So if there is a source of information, we can pull that information in and analyze it. So we do it. It's reduced use cases. There's far less data, and we do a little bit more manual analysis because you don't have the volume to allow the AI engine to do its whizzy stuff. But we're able, I think the key thing is we're able to get hold of that information. We at least know it's there, so we can give our B2B business partners verbatim still around what people are saying to each other. And in the B2B market, we do tend to see organizations give recommendations and advice to other organizations on what products and services work for them. So there's quite a nice community of recommendation that happens, and we start to pull that in to say to our B2B customers, well, hey, these guys are recommending that organization because they offer this, this, and this. So we can still give them something meaningful to help them improve our propositions and our developments in the B2B space.
Well, thank you very much, Matthew. I think that was amazing. I'm a bit of a data geek, so that was enthralling.
Me too.
So thank you very much.